Thing I want to visit is, what is the projection for solar going forward? And of course, that's a projection, but nonetheless, I think it's significant that people understand copper or no copper, silver or no silver. I should say silver will always be used, but it has a rather dramatic look going forward. So right now, my initial view is that copper substitution in solar is real, but it's really about timing and scale. The industry has every incentive to shift silver at current prices. And, we discussed this when silver was in the $100 range or above 80, if I recall correctly. And China is clearly pushing hard on silver-coated copper plating, and lower silver paste technologies. That said, I would assume that space does not make a major dent in global silver demand overnight. So these are ideas. They need to be tested. And it's not an overnight flip the switch, replace silver with copper. It cannot be done. And before I go on, I want to point out the fact that around the year 2010, I did a look at the silver market based on what I saw for the next decade. And a lot of my study on that projection was based on Jessica Cross, who was with, I think she was with Metals Focus or the Forerunner 2. And she had done an outline of how much silver would be used in solar. So I took her at her word. She's very reliable and, good analyst. She was way off. The reason she was way off is that what's called thrifting in the industry is, how much wattage can I get out per unit of silver, and you're always trying to decrease that because it's economics. You want to get as much bang for the buck, excuse the slang, but you want to get the maximum efficiency per ounce of silver. And if you're getting X watts out of an ounce, and then 10 years later you're getting 2X per ounce, obviously you've cut your silver costs in half, assuming it stayed the same price. Thrift more and more silver out of a solar panel is not necessarily true. So I said all that to move onward. So the important discussion is partial substitution, not full replacement. I think that's something that you might read an article or hear something that just isn't true. Solar manufacturers may be able to reduce silver loading per cell, but doing that at scale, maintaining, as I said, the efficiency, reliability, because copper is not as reliable as silver, and bankability, that's a totally different matter. And in my view, this is likely to be a multi-year process. So don't, stop buying silver as an investment if you're basing it totally on solar projections. I mean, to see what silver did this year in January, go up 70% in a month, that's an unreal expectation, yet it's typical of silver's behavior at the end of a great run. And I will say it publicly, and this will be the first time, I want people to take this in context. First, let me restate, I do not think the bull market is over. I do think silver will go higher than 120, 121 we saw in January because of all the fundamental facts I just outlined. However, I do want to state there's a probability, small, probably 5% or less, that we did see the high. And the reason I say that is I've been in this market more than 40 years, and I know silver and how it reacts. And when you see that final parabolic move that we witnessed, and then you see a 50% decline like we've witnessed, it does make me reconsider with my engineering brain, wow, technically that looks like something that we saw in 1980, something that we saw in 2011. I cannot refute the fact I'm seeing it again here. Does that mean that's it? I do not think so. In fact, I bought more silver last Friday, so the last business day of last week, and I'm doing this Monday morning. So I am putting my money where my mouth is.
Copper replacing silver and solar is real, but it's a multi-year process, not overnight. Silver paste is up to 30% of cell costs, so manufacturers are testing copper. But copper oxidizes, degrades, and must pass bankability tests. Solar demand still projected to grow 40% by 2030. Industrial silver demand doubled from 35% to over 60% in 25 years. Monetary demand drives silver prices, and that's increasing. David Morgan bought more silver last Friday. He sees silver above $120. There's a small chance, 5%, January was the peak. Silver is still a buy.
No, thank you. Well, the big picture is what moves the market the most, and it's really not industrial demand. Industrial demand has gone from 35% of the market 25 years ago to over 60% of the market today. So it's almost doubled, and in real terms, it's more than doubled, because 25 years ago, the most mined on an annual basis was 550 million ounces, and today it's about 850 million ounces. So you can do those percentages in the math. The point being that the industrial demand continues to increase, and it doesn't vary too much. In a recession, it does go down, and in more abundant times, it does increase, but it's slight. Now, on the monetary demand, that's where it really jumps up and down. And you can see that in the ETF input and output. You can see it in retail demand, and you also could see it in institutional demand. If you go back to 2020, 21, the amount of institutions that bought into the silver market was 320 million ounces. Now, I believe, and I do not know, I think perhaps it was Scott Maynard that did that, and he had made a statement at the WEF in front of some Bloomberg reporters that his go-to investment that year was silver, not gold, and they quizzed him on that, and he said it was down 60%, and gold was higher or near its all-time high, and he thought it was better value. But I digress there. So monetary demand is what swings it. The monetary demand, in my view, will increase because of uncertainty in the monetary system. We know that gold has replaced treasuries as the number one asset on a central bank basis. That's really key. What it's telling us is that we're not trusting the paper of the U.S. as much as we trust gold. So gold and silver do have a high correlation. It's been as high as 85%. Today, it's probably more like 80. I haven't looked it up, but it's still a very high correlation. Silver does what gold does on a monetary basis almost always, which means preservation of wealth. You can still buy a 25-cent quarter, 90%. You could buy a couple gallons of gas. I could only buy about 1 gallon of gas when I was 16 years old for a silver quarter. So it has maintained purchasing power even at today's price of under $60 per ounce. Going forward, until the monetary question is resolved in one way or another, default, I doubt it. New system, I think so. But until that's resolved, the monetary demand will continue. And of course, technology will continue to increase the demand on silver, as I mentioned, the robotics. So from a long-term, meaning intermediate term, meaning the next year to 5 years, until there's a reset or something that changes the monetary system, the pressure to both gold and silver, the upside, is substantial. So I think that more and more people will come to realize that the only way out of their savings in institutional holders, being it banks or brokerages, or perhaps their insurance company, is something outside the system. And the only monetary outside of the system are gold and silver. Since silver is cheaper and has more upside, the younger people, I think, will gravitate it more than, let's say, older adults, although both will probably look at silver as part of their holdings. So I think it's a very bright future for silver going forward, but the volatility can certainly shake a lot of people out. I mean, I thought the $100 level was probably a good exit point for part of your holdings, and I put a PDF file together for my numbers ahead of time and outline some guidelines as far as exiting part of your position on the way up. Several did, but I've also advocated never selling everything, because if we go into a hyperinflationary depression or even a debt liquidating depression, you'll want some precious metals. Why are they doing this? Obviously, it's mostly economic. Silver paste has become a cost item. And PV Magazine, which is one of the most reliable sources you can use, which I got much of this information from, reported silver paste can represent up to 30% of the total sell cost. Now, again, that was above $80 the ounce, and today we're at below 60, I believe. And silver's overtaken almost any other single molecule cost component. In other words, silver is probably the main impact, 30%. Obviously, there's another 70% involved, but it's certainly on a per basis, what's the number one subset of the totality, silver would be the leader. I hope I made sense on that statement. So 2026 is the first serious commercial year to see how much copper we can use. DK Electronic Materials says, again, a source, that 2026 should mark the first year of large-scale mass production for high copper paste, with a tier one manufacturer accelerating and evaluating the results. And I can't pronounce this, a German name, but Fraunhofer ISC cautions that lower efficiency is not acceptable and pure copper paste still needs work on oxidation. Oxidase is worse or more than silver does. And when silver oxidizes, it doesn't change the conductivity where copper does. That's something you electron people can understand. Diffusion risk and manufacturing ecosystem support. So until it's tested, it might look great in the lab, but you put it in the field for 2 years, and if it degrades at such a rapid rate, and I'm not saying it will, but I come from the aircraft test business, as you may recall, and no matter how good the design engineers came up with something, and some of it was phenomenal, but if the strength of materials was on paper going to last 5 years, and you tested it in flight and it's only going to last 2 years, you have a problem. Excuse me for digressing again. So the pros for using copper, of course, are lower costs, less silver price exposure, more abundant material, more abundant metal, and less pressure on the silver supply chain. However, there's cons to that as well, and that is copper oxidizes, can diffuse into silicon, may hurt the efficiency and or reliability, that's key, and must pass bankability tests. They're not going to get big loans from some of these banks until their tech department takes a look at it. Now, do all banks have tech departments? Heck no. But your money center banks will have somebody, probably a paid consultant, to say, hey, they might call me. I'm joking. But, they're going to find someone or some ones to verify, hey, this is a good idea. Should we put a lot of money in this? So solar demand backdrop, solar is still enormous. Now, if you look at the projections, again, I'm citing my sources here, but the best case for silver is 2026. We're actually down slightly from last year. 2027 projected to be 690 million gigawatts. 2028, 742 gigawatts. 2029, 800 gigawatts. And 2030, 864 gigawatts. So that is a substantial increase going forward from this year onward. This is, so that's one source, and I can find it here in a second. Solar Power Europe's medium case for the 2026 drop-off is mainly China's policy-related. By 2030. Annual demand is still projected to be roughly 40% higher than in 2026. Total solar capacity is projected to reach about 6.6 terawatts by 2030, with the high case being 7.6 terawatts. For contrast, so this is another source. That was the Solar Power Europe. The second source is the IEA, which is more conservative, and that's what I would use. They're stating about 3.6 terawatts installed from 2025 to 2030, with an additional moving towards 600 gigawatts, roughly 700 gigawatts by 2030. So in either case, the projection is more demand, more supply coming into the solar industry as far as we can. Well, absolutely, and I'm still working on it. I don't have a number yet, but robotics. I mean, if you're going to have a robot, vacuuming your house, making your food, or whatever it is, or in industry working in an Amazon warehouse, what's the battery life? What's the battery reliability, and how much silver is going to be used? Maybe if you don't even use a silver battery, although I'm suggesting that could be the case, I'm not saying would, how much is used just in the connections between, the eyes, the ears, and all the electronics that's involved in a robot. And if it's, I don't know, pick a number. I don't care. Pick X amount of silver per robot. And there's 500, there's, I don't know, make a number up, 20 million, in 2 years, and 5 times that much in 3 years later. How much silver is that going to use?